I was driving to a supplier meeting when the podcast host said my sister's name. I reached over to turn it up without thinking, the way you do when you hear someone you know mention somewhere you did not expect them. Then the host described her business and I stopped breathing. He called it a system for turning overlooked household budgets into quiet wealth. Word for word. That was the exact phrase I had used. Not something close to it. Not an industry term anyone might reach for. Those were my words from my document written in my own handwriting on a Tuesday evening 3 years ago when the idea first came to me clearly enough to write down. I pulled into a parking lot and sat there with the engine running. My name is Nora. I am 31 years old and I have worked from a small home office for the past 4 years, building a financial education brand one slow, careful step at a time. I am not the kind of person who moves fast or talks loud. I research before I act. I test before I launch. Every idea I have ever had starts the same way, written by hand on a yellow legal pad, dated at the top, timestamped like evidence because I was taught early that good ideas disappear if you do not nail them down. My twin sister Camille is everything I am not in the best possible way. She walks into rooms and people turn toward her the way plants turn toward light. She has always been the face of things. I have always been the engine. We have been close our whole lives. That part is important. The legal pad I mentioned sits in the top drawer of my desk. It has been there for 3 years. I drove home that evening and opened my laptop to watch Camille's interview from the beginning. The interview had already been viewed 2 million times. I watched it from the beginning with a cup of tea going cold beside me and the kind of careful attention I usually save for contracts. Camille looked beautiful. She always does. She was sitting across from the host in a pale yellow blazer, relaxed and easy, the way she has always been in front of people. The host introduced her as a self-made entrepreneur who had built something quietly revolutionary. The audience clapped. Camille smiled and tucked her hair behind her ear the way she has done since we were 12. Then she started talking about the business. She said she had always noticed that regular households were sitting on financial potential they could not see. That the problem was never income. It was an invisible structure. She said most budgeting tools were built for people who already understood money, and that nobody was building something for the people who did not know where to start but were willing to learn. I set down my cup. I remembered writing those exact thoughts. Not a version of them. Those thoughts. I remembered the evening I wrote them, sitting at my desk with the window cracked open and a candle burning on the shelf behind me. I remembered crossing out 2 earlier versions before I found the phrasing that finally felt right. The host leaned forward and asked her what made her concept different from anything else already on the market. Camille paused the way people do when they want to appear thoughtful rather than rehearsed. Then she said her approach was different because it treated the household like a small business. She said the whole system was built around one central idea, which she called the quiet ledger method. I did not move. Quiet ledger. That was not a term I had ever said out loud to anyone. It was not a phrase that existed anywhere in the financial education space. I had made it up one evening sitting at my desk with that yellow legal pad open in front of me. I had written it down, circled it, and written the word yes beside it in the margin because it was exactly right. It was the internal name I used for the core framework of my entire concept. I had never posted it online. I had never mentioned it in a pitch. I had only ever shared it in one place. I let the interview finish. Camille talked for another 20 minutes. She described the product structure, the target audience, the problem it solved at each stage. Every answer landed somewhere inside my memory. Not beside a memory. Inside one. When the video ended, I closed the laptop and sat in the quiet of my office for a long time. I did not call her. I did not text her. I have not written anything down yet. I just sat there and let myself understand what I had just watched. I have never been the kind of person who acts while she is still shaking. My mother used to say that about me when I was a child. She said I was the only kid she knew who would stop and think before crying. I do not know if that is a gift or just the way I am wired, but that night it was the only thing that kept me from picking up the phone and saying something I could not take back. I got up from my desk and walked to the kitchen. I drank a full glass of water standing at the sink. Then I walked back to my office and pulled open the top drawer. The yellow legal pad was right where it always is. I picked it up and looked at the top of the first page. The date was written in blue ink in my own handwriting. 3 years and 2 months ago. Below it, in the same careful print I use when I want to think clearly, was the full concept. Problem statement. The audience. The structure. The name. Quiet ledger method. Circled. With the word yes written beside it in the margin. I stood there holding it for a moment. Then I put it down gently, like it was something I needed to protect, and sat back down at my desk. I opened my email and typed Camille's name into the search bar. The thread came up immediately. I had forgotten how long it was. 14 emails over the course of 3 weeks sent about 2.5 years ago. I had shared everything with her in that chain. The full concept. The business model. Pricing structure. The name of the framework. I had even attached an early version of the audience outline I had been building at the time. I remembered why I had sent it. I was excited. She was my sister, and my first instinct when something felt real was to share it with her. I remembered her replies too once I started reading back through them. She had asked smart questions. She had said it sounded like something people genuinely needed. She had told me I should move on before someone else did. I sat with that last line for a long time. I wanted to call her. Part of me wanted to call her more than I had wanted anything in a long time, not to fight, just to hear her explain it in a way that made sense. But I knew how that call would go. I knew she would be warm and confused and slightly hurt that I was asking, and without something solid in my hand I would end up feeling like the problem. I was not going to look jealous. I was going to be prepared. I opened a private folder on my desktop, one I had never used before, and I started taking screenshots of every email in that thread, one by one, from the beginning. The next 3 weeks were the strangest of my life. Not because anything dramatic happened. 'Cause nothing did. I went to work every morning, answered emails, updated my content calendar, and watched my sister become famous in real time. It happened fast. That was the thing that surprised me most. One viral interview became 3 press features. 3 press features became a brand partnership with a financial app that had over 4 million users. Her social media following doubled in 11 days. I watched the numbers from a distance, the way you watch weather move across a field, steady and quiet and completely out of your control. I did not comment on any of her posts. I did not share the interview. I did not reach out. I just watched and kept adding to the private folder on my desktop. She called me on a Thursday evening, about 2 weeks after I had watched the interview for the first time. I was making dinner when my phone lit up with her name. I turned the stove down and answered. She was happy in the way she gets when life is moving in her direction, a little breathless, talking faster than usual. She told me about the brand deal. She told me a morning television segment was being discussed. She said she could not believe how quickly everything was growing. I listened and I said the things a good sister says. I told her I was proud of her. I told her it sounded like everything was coming together. I kept my voice warm and I meant enough of it that it did not feel like a full lie. Then she said something that stopped me cold for the second time in 2 weeks. She laughed and said the best part was that the core framework was so simple even her accountant had not heard anything like it before. She said he had asked her how long she had been developing the structural side of the concept, and she had told him it had come to her slowly over a long period of sitting with the problem. Sitting with the problem. That was a phrase from the second page of my legal pad. Not a common expression. Not something anyone in the financial space used regularly. It was a specific phrase I had used to describe my own development process, written in my own words in a document she had no business knowing. I finished the call 2 minutes later. I kept my voice exactly the same until the end. I want to pause here for just a second because I need to know something. Drop a number in the comments right now. On a scale of 1 to 10, how long do you think you could have stayed quiet in that moment? 'Cause I want you to be honest with yourself before we go any further. The next time she called, I was ready. I had checked my state's recording laws the evening after that first call. One-party consent. Legal. I let it ring twice. Then I answered and pressed the record. There is a limit to what you can build alone. I have always known that about myself. I am good at research and I am good at patience, but I also know when I need someone else in the room. That is why, on a Sunday morning about 3 weeks after I started the private folder, I called Delia. Delia and I had worked together briefly at a small financial content agency 4 years ago. We were never close in the way that people become friends for life, but we had a real working relationship built on honest feedback and long brainstorm sessions over bad coffee. She was sharp and she had a good memory. More importantly, she was someone I had shared the early version of my concept with before I ever mentioned it to Camille. I called her without explaining too much at first. I just asked if she remembered a conversation we had had years back about a budgeting framework I was developing. She was quiet for a second and then she said yes, she remembered it clearly because I had described it in a way that had stuck with her. She said she had actually tried to find me on social media a few months back after she saw a viral interview about something that sounded exactly like what I had pitched to her. That was when I told her what was happening. She did not say much while I explained. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment and then she said she needed to check something. She called me back 40 minutes later. She had found a voice message. I had sent it to her through a work messaging app we had both used at the agency, a platform that archived everything automatically. The message was 2 minutes and 17 seconds long. In it, I described the full concept, including the framework name, the target audience, and the core problem the system was designed to solve. Timestamp put it at 2 full years before Camille launched her business. I sat very still while Delia read me the timestamp out loud. Then she told me the second thing, and that was the part that changed the shape of everything. She had a mutual contact, a woman named Priya who worked in early-stage startup introductions. Priya had been the one to connect Camille with her first investor. Delia knew this because Priya had mentioned it casually in conversation months ago, proud of the introduction. What Delia had not known until she went looking was how Priya had made the pitch. She had used a deck. A short one, just 6 slides, sent as a soft introduction before the formal meeting. Delia had seen 2 slides from that deck. Priya had shared them with her at the time without thinking anything of it. The language matched mine almost word for word. This was no longer just my sister hearing an idea and deciding to use it. Someone had helped her build the structure around it before she ever went public. Picture was bigger than I had thought, and it had been carefully put together. After the call with Delia, I did not sleep well for 2 nights. Not because I was falling apart, but because my mind would not stop working. Every time I closed my eyes, I found myself retracing the timeline, looking for the edges of something I could not yet see the full shape of. By the 3rd morning, I decided the only way to quiet my mind was to keep moving forward. I started with public records. Camille's LLC was registered and easy to find. I pulled up the filing details and wrote down the date. Then I went back to my email archive and found the last message in our chain, the one where I had told her I was finally ready to move forward, that I had finished the framework and was starting to think seriously about launch timing. The LLC was filed 6 weeks after that email. I sat with that number for a long time. 6 weeks. Not months later. Not a year later, the way it might look if someone had simply been inspired and gone off to build something of their own. 6 weeks after I told my sister I was ready, she had registered a business built around my concept. I wrote the 2 dates side by side on a fresh page of the legal pad. Then I went looking for the investor deck. Took me the better part of a day, but I found it through a public pitch competition archive. Camille had entered an early-stage startup showcase about 18 months ago, before the business had gained any real attention. The archive had a summary document attached to her entry, a condensed version of the original deck submitted for review. I opened my own original concept document alongside it. I went through them section by section. Problem statement, target audience description, the framework structure, the language used to describe the gap in the market. The match was not close. It was overwhelming. Whole sentences had been rearranged slightly, but the bones were identical. Anyone who had read both documents would have seen it immediately. I added everything to the private folder and kept going. The last thing I found I was not looking for directly. I had been searching Priya's name alongside Camille's, trying to understand the timeline of their connection, when I came across a thread that had been partially screenshotted and shared in a small private business forum I had access to through an old membership. Someone had posted it as an example of aggressive startup strategy without naming names fully. But the names were there if you looked. In the thread, Camille had written to Priya directly. She said she needed to move quickly. She used the phrase "getting ahead of it before it gets complicated." In the next message, she described the concept in enough detail that there was no question what she was referring to. She had known exactly what she was taking. She had moved fast on purpose. This was never an accident. It was a decision. The email from the journalist came on a Wednesday morning. Her name was Simone, and she wrote for a mid-sized business publication that covered emerging entrepreneurs. She said she was working on a follow-up feature about Camille's growing platform and wanted to include a quote from someone close to her. She had found my name through a mutual contact and thought a twin sister's perspective would add something personal to the piece. I read the email 3 times before I replied. I told her I would be happy to speak with her. I told her I admired what my sister had built and that I had some thoughts I would love to share when the time was right. I kept it warm and I kept it vague, and I asked her if we could schedule something for the following week. She wrote back within the hour and said that worked perfectly. I closed the laptop and sat quietly for a moment. Then I opened my phone and sent Camille a message. I told her I had been thinking about her and that I was genuinely proud of everything she had been building. I told her it had been too long since we had properly talked and asked if she wanted to catch up soon, just the two of us. I kept the tone light and easy, the way our messages had always sounded before any of this. She replied in less than 10 minutes. She said she had been wanting to call me anyway and that it felt like we kept missing each other. She sent a string of warm words and said she was free that Friday evening. Friday came and I answered the call with my recording app already running. She was relaxed in a way she had not been during the first call. There was no excitement making her speak too fast. She was settled into her success by then, and it showed in her voice. We talked about small things for the first few minutes, and then she brought up the business herself, the way people do when something is the biggest part of their life at that moment. She described the origin story again. This time there was more detail because she thought it was just us. She talked about the late nights she had spent developing the framework. She mentioned a specific evening she said she had spent alone working through the core concept, a night she described clearly, with weather and a meal she had cooked and a feeling of things clicking into place. That evening she described it was 3 weeks after I had sent her the email chain explaining everything. I let her finish. Then I asked the question I had been holding for weeks, as gently as I could manage. I said, "Do you remember when you first heard about this idea?" She paused for just a moment. Then she told me it had come to her gradually, that there was no single moment she could point to. I said that was interesting. Then I changed the subject. The recording was 4 minutes and 40 seconds long. I found my lawyer through a recommendation from a woman in a small business owners group I had been part of for 2 years. Her name was Karen Osei, and she had a quiet, direct way of speaking that made me trust her immediately. I sent her everything in one organized folder, the same private folder I had been building for weeks. The email chain, the photographs of the legal pad, Delia's voice message with its timestamp, the recorded calls, the LLC filing date beside the date of my last email, pitch competition archive, the forum screenshot. She reviewed everything over 2 days. Then she called me and said we had a strong case and that she wanted to move quickly. The formal letter went out on a Tuesday morning. One copy to Camille. One to her investor. One to Simone, the journalist. By Thursday evening my phone started ringing. Camille called first. I did not answer. She left a voicemail that was sharp and fast. Her voice pulled tight in a way I had not heard since we were teenagers arguing over something that no longer mattered. She said the letter was unnecessary and that I was blowing something small into something it did not need to become. She said we should talk before lawyers made everything worse. I sent her message to Karen and did not call back. She called again the next morning. This time her voice was different. The sharpness was gone and something more unsteady had replaced it. She said she had spoken to her investor and that things were being complicated by the letter in ways she had not expected. She said she needed me to understand that her intentions had never been to hurt me and that the whole situation was more complicated than it looked from the outside. I forwarded that voicemail to Karen as well. The third call came 2 days later. By then she was bargaining. She used the word collaborative. She said the concept had evolved significantly from anything early and that there was room to acknowledge shared origins in a way that worked for both of us. She said she had already spoken to her PR team. Her PR team released a statement the following morning. Described the business as having grown from years of collaborative conversations between two sisters passionate about financial education. It was carefully worded and completely unsupported by anything that existed on paper. Timestamps did not care about careful wording. Simone pulled the feature the same day the letter arrived. She sent me a brief professional message saying she was pausing the piece pending further review and that she appreciated my transparency. The investor requested separate meetings with both of us within the week. Karen attended mine. After reviewing the documentation, he withdrew his active support pending legal clarification. I said nothing publicly through any of it. Karen spoke when speaking was needed. The email chain spoke. The voice message spoke. The dates at the top of every document spoke in a way that no statement from any PR team could answer. The legal matter settled 4 months later. There was no courtroom. No public filing that anyone could search and find. Karen negotiated everything in writing over several weeks with Camille's legal team, and when it was done there was a formal acknowledgement of origin, a licensing agreement that recognized my intellectual ownership of the core framework, and a financial resolution I am not able to discuss in detail. What I can say is that it was fair. And that fair was enough. Camille and I have not spoken properly since the letters went out. I do not know what that silence will eventually become. I have stopped trying to predict it. There are people in your life who you love in a way that does not require you to pretend that what they did was something smaller than it was. I love my sister. I also know exactly what she chose to do and exactly how long she planned it before she did it. Both of those things are true at the same time, and I have made my peace with holding them together. What I want to tell you about is what happened next. Not the legal part. The other part. I launched the Quiet Ledger 3 months after the settlement. Not as an answer to anything Camille had built. Not as a correction of the public record. I launched it because it was the thing I had always been building toward, and the time had finally come to stop waiting. The early traction surprised me, even though it probably should not have. Concept was sound because I had spent 3 years making it sound before anyone else ever heard about it. The depth was there. The research was there. The framework held up under real use because it had been built slowly and carefully by someone who understood the problem from the inside. Camille had the head start in the press and the brand deals. I had everything underneath all of that. Within the first 2 months, I had a waiting list. Within 4 months, a partnership approach came from a platform I had respected for years. Within 6 months, the business was sustaining itself without my needing to think about survival every morning when I woke up. I still work from the same small home office. I still start early and move carefully and test before I launch anything. Some things about the way I work have not changed at all. The yellow legal pad is still in the top drawer of my desk. I kept it there on purpose. Some mornings I open the drawer just to see it, not to dwell on anything, just to remember that the date at the top of the first page belongs to me and always did. Last week I pulled out a fresh pad. I wrote the date at the top in blue ink the way I always do. Then I wrote the first line of something new, a concept I have been sitting with for a while now, one I have not shared with anyone yet. She took the idea. She couldn't take what built it. If you like stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories.